Всем привет, дамы и господа, с вами Альбом Палитра. 20 человеческих ошибок, которые навсегда изменили историю. Watch Mojo. О, привет, Джокер. Я тебя уже видел в топе 50 фильмов, вызвавших негативную реакцию. Сегодня вышел как раз, да.
300,000 souls live in the city. And they've all just left?
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the most consequential blunders throughout
Романов.
human history.
The simultaneous collapse of four powers is unprecedented.
Кстати, у меня с одним челиком в прошлом году вышел Collapse альбом, послушайте.
Kim Jong-nam goes to Tokyo Disneyland.
Кто мог подумать, да, Диснейленд, проблемы. Ну, типа, Брайан Мэпс рассказывал про то, что там были проблемы с одним аттракционом. Ну и все.
Why would the young dictator of North Korea want to kill his own brother? Well, to understand North Korea, you really have to think of it as being
Я больше привлекает внимание вот этот чел.
an absolute monarchy, the Kim dynasty. North Korea, you really have to think of it as being an absolute monarchy,
Блять, а вот это прикольно придумали.
the Kim dynasty. The dynasty
Династия Кардашьян.
was founded by Kim Il-sung after the Second World War. When the old man died in 1994,
Старик! Я думаю, британцы не говорили бы «старик».
his son, Kim Jong-il, ascended the throne.
Kim Jong-nam was once the heir to the North Korean dictatorship until 2000.
Кстати, он был изображен на превью. Я вот думал, так, чё может быть с ним? Назначение, да?
2001, when he made an embarrassing attempt to visit Tokyo Disney.
Кстати, художница, которая живет не дай бог, живет в Южной Корее, в Сеуле, нарисовала мне аватарку этого канала, которая была на самом деле просто артом на днюху. Но она стала, она есть, она была, есть и будет аватаркой канала Алекса Назаренко. Круто было попасть в один гэнг, где мне встретилась художница, живущая в Сеуле, наполовину русская, наполовину кореянка. Плюс я этот факт могу упоминать в роликах, где упоминается Корея.
Traveling on a fake Dominican Republic passport bearing a Chinese name, Kim was arrested upon arrival in Japan and deported to China. The incident deeply embarrassed his father, Kim Jong-il, and caused him to be shunned by his family. Ultimately, his younger half-brother, Kim Jong-un, took over from their father.
Ебать, на себя не похож.
By his family. Ultimately, his...
Он похож на... Блин, ну на кореша нашего президента он не похож. Кстати, есть классная озвучечка встречи Путина и Ким Чен Ына. Павел Мэй, озвучка Ким Чен Ын, все.
His younger half-brother Kim Jong-un took over from their father. In 2017, Kim was assassinated in Malaysia, and it was later revealed that he had been a CIA informant.
Why he killed? You don't know? Because his power is not stable. Last time
И он хотел стабильности. Ким Чен Ын хотел стабильной диктатуры.
Kim Jong-il, his father, he never killed people. But now, I don't think so. That's why he killed all the people. He cannot trust the people, right?
He also supported reform and free
Это не он.
market policies, which apparently contributed to him being passed over. Had he never attempted that fateful trip, perhaps North Korea's trajectory might have been
Блядь, мне нравится, как они делают сюжеты. Монтажик прикольненький.
different.
After Jang Sang-tae executed it, killed it, after that, 1 year, 1.5 years, only one time. I saw him. I was waiting for him, but he never come.
Потому что его убили.
It means his situation completely changed, be dangerous, and then the suffering for the money.
Byzantine refusal to hire Orban.
Praise to all of you, engineer Orban.
У меня вайба великолепного века.
Thank you, my sultan.
султан есть свой.
Have a safe journey.
The Roman Empire's final 2 centuries were their most difficult.
Блять, я вспомнил, короче, на географии у нас мы сдавали какую-то работу, что-то, и там я рассказывал про Рим, и меня очень спрашивают, что привлекает людей в Риме. Я такой, блять, история. Учитель говорит мне, история. Я такой, блядь, да, история, точно.
By 1452, the Ottoman Empire already had its eyes on Constantinople,
Надо поставить лайк за этот интересный урок истории.
which prompted Hungarian siege engineer Orban to offer his cannons to the Romans. Unfortunately, they couldn't afford his services or provide the materials needed to construct his weapons. So, Orban took his business to the Ottomans, who happily took him on.
У них нет денег меня купить. Вы меня сможете купить? Вам есть пушки.
Do not fail us in our mission. Let our courageous soldiers be victorious on the battlefield.
He crafted the basilic, one of the largest cannons in history, requiring 90 oxen and 400 men to transport it. Its cannonballs, each weighing 1,200 pounds, devastated the Theodosian walls, which
Еще б не разрушили.
were impenetrable for about 800
Сколько им выстроить понадобилось?
years prior. The Ottoman Sultan also carried warships across the land, bypassing the harbor's Great Chain and giving them another huge advantage.
Somebody hold the rope. Tuck the ship. Come on.
Titanic sinks after iceberg warnings are ignored.
Да. Если вы посмотрели «Титаник» и поплакали, я знаю, что может вам поднять настроение. Ведь у Джона Трона и ностальгирующего критика есть ролик про итальянский «Титаник», где у нас есть мыши, говорящие с мексиканским акцентом, и пес-рэпер, блядь. Что? Вы скажете, что за хуйню ты несешь? А я говорю, «Титаник! Итальянский!» Да, ladies and gentlemen. К тому же, у ностальгирующего критика еще есть обзоры на еще на два фильма про «Титаник» итальянских. Кстати, если хотите посмотреть реакцию, его смотрите. Да, итальянцам... Блин, еще знаете, что самое интересное? У них есть мультяшный фильм, который называется «Легенда о Титанике». Ну, знаете, знаменитая легенда, где дохуя людей погибло. Ну, знаете, легенда.
They turning. Is it hard over? It is. Yes, sir. Hard over.
Да, это конец.
Many mistakes were made that caused the Titanic to sink, so it's difficult to pinpoint just one. Perhaps the most consequential, though, was turning hard to starboard when they spotted the iceberg.
А еще знаете, что прикольно? В одном из фильмов вот эти вот взрывы, которые были,
Just one. Perhaps
они использовали одни и те же кадры, что показывают, что у них там произошло. Да, кстати, еще в двух фильмах внимание не на «Титанике» идет. Что? Так, ну... Есть китобои, есть акулы, которые какого-то хуя с ними сотрудничают. Есть гигантский осьминог, который акулы говорят ему, что круто кинуть айсберг. Потом он держит айсберг своими щупальцами. В общем, да, блять, это достойно вашего просмотра.
the most consequential, though, was turning hard to starboard when they spotted the iceberg, which extended the collision, creating a large gash that flooded 5 compartments.
Ну и, блядь, Путин, конечно, зря начал войну. Потому что фанаты фильма «Титаник» его раньше смотрели 8 марта по Первому каналу. Блядь, ну, короче, давайте просто остановимся на том, что это было, блядь, плохо. И дело не в «Титанике».
Had they struck the iceberg head-on, the bow would have been crushed, but only 1 or 2 compartments would have flooded.
Note the time, enter it in the log.
What was that, Mr. Murdoch?
An iceberg, sir. I put a hard to starboard and
А я повернул налево.
The engine's full of stern, but it was too close. I tried to port round it, but she hit.
In such an event, the ship could have survived, as it was built to still float with up to 4 flooded compartments. Also, it only carried 20 lifeboats, enough for about half
Да, а в итальянском мультфильме шлюпок хватило на всех, блядь.
its passengers. The primary mistake that night was ignoring iceberg warnings and maintaining a high speed throughout. Changing just this one decision could likely have prevented the accident.
The pumps. If we open the doors...
pumps buy you time, but minutes only.
Блядь, ну давайте смотреть с позитивной точки зрения. Не было бы смертей, не было бы... А, подождите. Но если бы этого не произошло, не было смертей, да. Но если бы эта катастрофа не произошла, у нас бы не было пиздатого итальянского мультфильма, еще 2 итальянских мультфильмов, песни, которые сделали из обзора Джона Трона до игры про Титаник. Да, у них там не написано Титаник на одном из картриджей, а Титаник. В общем, давайте мыслить позитивно. И не думайте о плохом. Новости нам и так это дают.
From this moment, no matter what we do, Titanic will founder.
Mexico
Titanic, а не Titanic.
attacks the Alamo.
If you could oversee manning the walls, it would be a help. We should have 6 men to a cannon, 18 tubes, which works out to...
108 men.
Мало.
And we should have a man with a musket every 4 feet of wall.
Я возьму 12 человек.
Need more men.
In 1836, the Texas Revolution was underway, with the Anglo-American residents of Texas fighting for independence from the Mexican Republic. They were successful, winning 10 years of independence before joining the United States in 1846. During the war, Mexican forces under General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna laid siege to the Alamo.
You said you wanted to see him. There he is.
The Napoleon of the West.
Which one?
Наполеона мы, походу, еще увидим, да? Он же в начале был.
That's Santa Anna.
Yeah.
He's quite the peacock, isn't he?
After
Пикок. Давай смотреть фильмы на Пикок.
13 days, roughly 1,500 Mexican soldiers launched a decisive attack, overwhelming the garrison of about 200 Texians after 3 attempts. It was a Pyrrhic victory, though, as the merciless bloodshed inspired many to join the army, hoping to take revenge for the loss of their fellow Texians. Mere weeks later, a now fortified Texian army attacked the Mexicans by surprise in the Battle of San Jacinto, decimating them in just 18 minutes.
Засекайте! Сейчас за 18 минут их уделаем.
This very moment, our soldiers are held in the Alamo against a force of thousands. They put their hopes in Colonel Fannin, who, despite his pedigree, has proven himself ill-equipped to lead, much less march an army. This is from Colonel Travis. I call on you, in the name of liberty, to come to our aid with all dispatch.
Trojans bring in the horse.
What is this?
Троянский конь.
An offering to Poseidon. The Greeks are praying for a safe return home. This is a gift. We should take it to the temple of Poseidon.
I think we should burn it. Burn it?
Ты чё, там же люди. Ой, проговорился.
My prince, it's a gift to the god.
This was a mistake
Люди в коне.
so monumental it became a metaphor for deception that is still widely used today. The ancient city of Troy was first destroyed around 1200 BC, and again by archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann in the 19th century. According to legend, the Greeks built a giant wooden horse, hid soldiers in it, and presented it to the Trojans as a gift.
Helen, we must go. Where? I'll show you. Now, hurry. Paris. It's a long way, quick. We must go now.
Believing it to be a symbol of victory, the Trojans brought it into their city, only for Greek soldiers to emerge and decimate Troy. The tale's authenticity remains heavily
Я, конечно, мы это изучали до истории, но это было так давно, я не помню.
debated, with
Короче, мои знания о Трое, ну... реклама Ориона, Суперкубок, ну... Всё.
no direct evidence. However, oral history played a central role in
Я знаю, что там люди были.
the ancient world, which preserved surprisingly truthful elements, suggesting that this tale may have been inspired by real-life events.
Я комик. И мне хочется юморить. Я прекрасно понимаю, что это пиздец. Но не сидеть с грустной миной и говорить, обидно. Ну, блядь, да, но... Сука, это не так интересно смотреть. Плюс я вспоминаю свои школьные знания. В Шараге мы проходили... Так, мы проходили только русскую историю. Вроде бы. Так. Что тут у нас? Может быть и мировую как-то затрагивали. Вроде и мировая затрагивали, я не помню уже. Это был 23-й год. Ну, вроде русскую только.
Caesar ignores warnings.
Senator Verinas, I come about your grandson, Lucius.
Lucius? Ну-ка. Какой Люсиус?
Julius Caesar is most famous for sowing the seeds of the Roman Empire, enslaving and slaughtering millions of Gauls, and giving the month of July its name. He was eventually assassinated in 44 BC, which shouldn't have...
Ну, я еще хочу благодарить Цезаря за то, что его имя было использовано для салата. Пиздатый салат. Жалко, что я ел его всего один раз. Пока.
Come as a surprise, since he was given several warnings about it.
If I may, gracious Caesar...
Нет, я не буду говорить про торт Наполеон. Я не любитель. Ну, блядь, я его не ел часто, так же, как и Цезарь.
You were going to consider revoking my brother's exile.
I'm still considering it.
Подумайте.
Take your hand off me.
На нахуй. Отменяй. Такую штуку, кстати, проверял Чак и Мефисто. Take on me, take on me. Я уебу тебя своим полотенцем.
What are you waiting for? Now!
Пизделки.
Now! Now!
All of these were dismissed, leading to his death in the Senate, where he was stabbed 23 times. A soothsayer warned him to beware the Ides of March, the eventual date he was killed. His wife Calpurnia warned him to beware the Ides of March, the eventual date he was killed. His wife Calpurnia had a dream of his death and insisted he stay home, but he dismissed her fears. Ultimately, his trusted friend Brutus convinced him to come in, which turned out to be the dictator's final mistake.
Ну, скажи спасибо своему дружку. Хотя нет, ты сам себе спасибо скажи, нахуй ты его послушал.
You see, the tyrant is dead, the republic is restored, and you are alone.
А Цезаря мы теперь можем оскорблять, ведь он мертв нахуй. Он убит, блядь.
Would you like some honey water?
Давайте выпьем за его кончину.
I won't. Thank you.
Mao's great leap forward.
I saw Russian cars which the
Привет.
Chinese have begun to make.
А я знаю, что наши машины это машины, которые не совсем русские. Ну берем Фиат какой-нибудь, переделываем.
There were wood-burning buses of the type I had seen in Europe during the war.
Ну это точно наши тачки, мы любим дрова.
Vehicles of all kinds. In most places of the city, there was a good traffic control system.
Mao Zedong was the founder of Communist China, who became leader of the CCP during the Long March.
Ну неудивительно, что русские машины производили китайцы. У нас коммунизм, у них коммунизм.
A pivotal event in the Second Sino-Japanese War. After Japan's defeat, he sought to industrialize China and finally recover from the century of humiliation. He believed rapid industrialization would help them catch up to the West, but it turned into a catastrophic failure.
Here, oil is extracted from coal. Built in 1928 by the Japanese, destroyed during the war, it was restored and enlarged. The Japanese produced 225,000 tons of petroleum in their best year. 1957 production was 320,000 tons.
Я, кстати, сегодня в каком-то ролике узнал, что мы-то китайцы вообще продаем нефть только китайцам. А, да, это новый ролик разговорного жанра. Обзор на КВН.
1958 gold.
После 22 года мы больше китайцев не можем продавать нефть. Ну, не продаем. Или не покупают. Ну, насколько я знаю, у нас с Китаем тоже норм отношения. И Путин вместе с Си Цзиньпинем кенты.
440.
Как и с Ким Чен Ыном.
40,000 to catch up.
Короче, у Путина есть азиатский бро.
With Britain.
The plan was overly optimistic and resulted in mass famine and an economic collapse. By 1962, Mao faced criticism for his policies and was sidelined at the 7,000 Cadres Conference.
Правильно.
This didn't last long, though, as just 4 years
Почему?
later, he kickstarted the Cultural Revolution, which allowed him to reclaim full control of the nation.
Coal comes from the Fushun mines. The plant also has its own department store, canteen, and club. Built during
Это очень важная информация.
the Japanese occupation, the plant has been restored and enlarged following wartime destruction. All kinds of steel products are made.
NASA ignores Challenger warnings.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
In 1986, NASA launched the shuttle Challenger, which tragically exploded only 73 seconds after liftoff.
Ну, зная других неудачных запусков ракет, как бы не удивляешься этому.
The event occurred during a cold morning, which caused the ship's rubber O-rings to stiffen, leading to a fuel leak that ignited the vessel. All 7 crew members perished, marking one of the darkest moments in the history of space exploration.
Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Months earlier, several engineers, including Roger Beaujolais, had warned of an impending failure due to the O-ring's vulnerability to cold. Beaujolais even wrote a memo outlining this issue, but his concerns were completely ignored.
Да похуй на этого инженера, блядь, запускайте ракету!
Although a team was formed to address the problem, they lacked adequate support, and the launch proceeded, only to end disastrously, like
Блядь, а ведь он был прав!
Beaujolais predicted. America escalating tensions in Vietnam.
It was a serious mistake for Kennedy to get involved as he did.
Кто убил Кеннеди?
With American force in that part of the world, thinking that this great monolithic Soviet-style communism would rule the roost, when he could have played it differently, I believe, and fought it more subtly.
The United States entered the Vietnam War following the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where North Vietnamese forces allegedly attacked the U.S. Navy in international waters. The event was framed as an unprovoked attack, but later evidence showed otherwise.
The great word of the Vietnam War gave us was escalation, because it starts off with Kennedy sending in just 400 military advisors who are actually special forces, all military advisors who are actually special forces, organizing.
Бля, ну как-то глупо отправлять спецназовцев, когда у вас такая серьезная штука во Вьетнаме, а вы Кеннеди такой, ну давайте, спецназовцев, сколько? 400. Вот нормально, я считаю.
And controlling the action, and then more go in.
While the first attack remains debated, the second one was entirely fabricated. It devolved into a brutal war, which dragged on for years, causing thousands of American and Vietnamese deaths. Along the way, the United States committed atrocious war crimes, such as the My Lai massacre. Ultimately, the war ended in failure, all spurred on by an incident with very little evidence.
He should have fought it with the limited aid he gave initially.
How's that for a holiday?
What are you waiting for? Come and say
Блять, как это не вовремя, нахуй.
g'day.
I love how Vanguard helps me invest for my future.
Fuck you.
Value to investors.
The development of the special forces, the Green Berets as they're called, and other small tactical units, and not created this great surge of North Vietnamese resentment.
Angering Genghis Khan.
The Latins. Yes, I remember.
У нас, кстати, был в классе пацан, которого звали Чингис. Ну и, конечно, все на него смотрели, когда мы проходили Чингисхана.
But where are the Christian priests you were to bring?
Lord Kublai, please accept our remorse. Our priests could not bear the rigors of the journey.
Many words can be used to describe Genghis Khan, one of history's most successful conquerors, but cool-headed isn't one of them. In less than 2 years, Genghis annihilated the Khwarezmian Empire. While there were a variety of factors that contributed to this invasion, the main one was an insult to his ambassadors.
Loyalty of a mortal son to a mortal...
Was an insult to his ambassador.
Чё, оскорбили меня? В атаку.
Loyalty of a mortal son to a mortal father, great Khan.
На нахуй.
Holy oil from the pontiff who wishes to spread Christianity throughout my lands. Is this not the same pope who has called me the spawn of Satan?
Этот папа римский не хочет отправиться, блядь, в свой Рим обратно.
In 1218, the Khan sent a caravan to the empire, who were...
Блядь, ну, жалко. Просто, ура, мы идем! Вот так, мне кажется, думал хан, а потом они все арестованы оказались.
Arrested and executed on suspicion of being spies.
Чё, ёпта? Шпионы? Ну, посидите, а потом мы вас казним.
When Genghis sent diplomats to deal with the situation...
Слушайте, мы понимаем, это пиздец, ну, пожалуйста, не надо, вы их так арестовали, давайте не казните их.
The Khwarezmians refused to comply.
Да пошел ты нахуй.
And beheaded the chief envoy. By 1221,
Ой, я угадал.
Their empire was shattered, and they had suffered somewhere between 2 and 15 million casualties. Maybe
Послали Чингисхана, я думал, Чингисхана послали, типа. А тут, оказывается, вот чё.
Of North Vietnamese resentment.
Angering Genghis Khan.
Разглядел Чингисхана. Да шо?
Was shattered, and they twice before you insult one of history's most ambitious conquerors.
Чё думаете, блядь? Я не могу на вас нахуй миллион послать. Могу. У вас наручников не хватит, чтобы их арестовывать. У вас тюрем не хватит, чтобы их посадить.
Is welcome in my kingdom.
Хорошо.
As is Buddhism.
Хорошо.
Judaism.
Ну, вы поняли.
Islam. And the eternal blue sky of my grandfather, Genghis Khan, descended from a wolf.
Forgetting
Это важное дополнение. Ауф.
About time zones hamstrung the Bay of Pigs invasion. During the Cold War, the US backed numerous coups d'etat around the world. While several of these succeeded in installing new regimes, attempts in Cuba failed spectacularly. Worried about Prime Minister Fidel Castro's communist policies, in 1961, the CIA orchestrated the infamous Bay of Pigs invasion, landing Cuban counter-revolutionaries on the country's southwestern coast. However, an obvious paint job on a B-26
Чё, кубинские? Давайте на родину.
bomber, disguised to look Cuban, gave away US involvement to the world, leading President Kennedy to pull back air support.
Мы проебались. Ужас.
A few days later, a last-ditch bombing raid flying out of Nicaragua was botched when bombers were caught without their escort of fighter jets. Embarrassingly, someone had forgotten the 1-hour difference between Nicaragua and Cuba. Fleming left bacteria out on his bench.
Так.
Scottish physician Alexander Fleming was a brilliant researcher, most famous
Но не блестящем плане внимательности, да?
for his work on bacteria, as well as this accidental discovery. While researching the bacteria Staphylococcus in 1928, Fleming left out cultures plates on a bench in his workshop over the weekend. When he returned, he observed that fungus had grown on the dish. In the areas close to the fungus, the bacteria had been eradicated. The mold led to the creation of the first antibiotic, penicillin. Without Fleming's mistake, the history of medicine in the last century would look very
Ага, то есть хорошо все закончить.
different, and many who lived may have died instead.
Я понял.
The Chernobyl nuclear disaster.
Ну, это очевидно.
There has been a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union, and the Soviets have admitted that it happened. The Soviet version is this. One of the atomic reactors at the Chernobyl atomic power plant near the city of Kiev was damaged, and there is speculation in Moscow that people were injured and may have died.
Я, насколько знаю, кстати, возвращаясь к той теме, антибиотики, это ж хорошо.
Chernobyl's meltdown was the most destructive nuclear disaster in history and could have been completely avoided if the proper procedures were followed. The disaster was immediately caused by a safety test, which was meant to be carried out during the day with a trained crew. Instead, the untrained night crew did the test, with very little time to prepare and properly carry it out.
The TMI.
Если хотите узнать все подробности, можете посмотреть обзор Бэткомедиа на фильм «Чернобыль», где допиздели, и Бэт дал исторические справки.
Accident was nothing compared with this. I would speculate that it was very serious. And the reason for that is that they've observed radiation levels 10 times normal from Finland all the way down to Stockholm.
The Soviets were also secret about their nuclear technology, withholding important information from operators and engineers who should have understood them. After the explosion, further mistakes were made, like the nearby town of Pripyat not being evacuated until over a full day later.
Я помню, когда был маленький, ну помладше, чем сейчас, я спросил у дедушки: «Дедушка, а на Чернобыле же там АЭС взорвалась?» И дед мне сказал: «Ты должен знать это!» Узнал.
It was the perfect storm of mistakes, leading to one of humanity's worst disasters.
You can be sure that the decision to disclose was made at the very highest level, undoubtedly by Gorbachev.
Я просто такой: Чернобыль, я знаю про Чернобыль, а что Чернобыль?
Gorbachev himself, and probably it took several days, undoubtedly by Gorbachev himself.
Я просто мечтал о том, чтобы послушать Горбачев.
And probably it took several days for the Soviet leaders to decide how to handle it.
A B-Day
Can you see the disc?
Я, кстати, всегда опера, когда был маленьким, читал как Орега.
It's a good disc.
Helped lose D-Day. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched an ambitious operation to retake Western Europe. Known as D-Day, the first landings occurred on the beaches of Normandy, France. The casualties were high, but the operation granted the Allies a foothold that would eventually lead to victory on the Western Front. However, things could have gone very differently. The Germans' most accomplished general, Erwin Rommel, was in charge of defending the Atlantic Wall against an invasion. However, he had decided to take leave, as the 6th was his wife's birthday.
Похуй! Ребят, у моей жены днюха, так что давайте-ка вы занимаетесь этим, а я в отпуск.
And German meteorologists had mistakenly predicted storms for another few weeks, making a seaborne invasion unlikely. Had Rommel been in command,
Ребят, там все норм будет, там это шторм, вы не думайте, что на нас нападут.
the Allies may never have gotten a beachhead to retake France. Russia sold Alaska. During the 19th century, the Crimean War caused several countries.
Ну, как говорится в песне Любе «Не валяй дурака, Америка», «А давай-ка родимую взад». Да, взад. Так и поется.
Russia sold Alaska. During the 19th century, the Crimean War caused several countries to begin exerting pressure on Russia through blockades of their sea routes. Because of this, they were unable to properly supply their largest overseas territory, Alaska. To offset this, in 1867, Russia sold the territory to the United States for $7.2 million. While it may have been a smart move at the time for Russia, in retrospect, it's often seen as a mistake. as the gold and oil discovered in Alaska far exceeds the value it sold for. Not only that, but Russia having a foothold in the North American continent would have caused the Cold War to play out very differently. A rushed public announcement brought the Berlin Wall down. The Berlin Wall was not only a grim symbol of the divide between East and West Germany, but also of the Iron Curtain, erected to stem the massive...
Какая-то известная группа выступала. Вот же рассказывал. Угу. Ага.
Exodus from the communist-controlled East, the Berlin Wall was not only a grim symbol of the divide between East and West Germany, but also of the Iron Curtain, erected to stem the massive exodus from the communist-controlled East to the democratic West. However, it all came crumbling down much faster than expected, thanks to an unprepared East German official. On November 9th, 1989, Günter Schabowski was handed a text about new travel allowances, but didn't have time to review it before his press conference. Instead of telling people that East German citizens could apply to cross the border the following day, he said that people could cross immediately.
Давайте, пересекайте. Не похуй.
This quickly led to thousands crowding the wall. Unwilling to open fire, border guards let them through, and the rest is history. Hitler's invasion of Russia. A British soldier's choice to spare the future Führer's life during World War I turned out to be a...
В этом году, кстати, у нас юбилей дата.
Huge blunder. But we'd argue that the most dramatic mistake involving Adolf Hitler was one he made himself.
Да.
Despite signing a non-aggression pact with Russia, Hitler still considered Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union his enemies.
Долбоёб.
In June of 1941, the Germans invaded Russia.
Без предупреждения.
Despite committing the largest invasion force in history, the Germans were unprepared for the Soviet scorched earth tactics or the bleak Russian winter, and they experienced over 500,000 casualties. The offensive split and depleted the German forces, and put Russia on the side of the Allies, which likely lost Hitler the war. A wrong turn put Russia on the side of the Allies, which likely lost Hitler the war. A wrong...
Давайте, кстати, я еще такую темку хочу показать. Но мы давно с китайцами дружим. Поляки, бельгийцы, нидерландцы. Америка, Франция. Ну, сильные у нас союзники были, да?
Wrong turn started World War I, one of the most famous killings of all time. The assassination of Austro-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand is usually credited with being the catalyst for World War I. But what some may not know is that it could have been avoided, if not for a wrong turn. The Archduke had already survived one assassination attempt with a bomb by the same group while visiting Sarajevo. On the return journey, the Archduke's drivers, who spoke Czech, couldn't understand their directions for a new route, and took a wrong turn. When they stopped, couldn't understand their directions for a new route, and took a wrong turn. When they stopped to reorient, it was right next to one of the assassins, who promptly pulled out a gun and shot both Ferdinand and his wife. Treaty of Versailles harsh terms.
If you think of September the 11th, but then you think of September the 11th style casualties every day for 4 years,
Очень не любит эту дату YouTube.
Then you begin to get some kind of feeling of what the sort of trauma was that existed in the Western countries.
Вообще, 20 сентября для них вообще.
The Allied countries at the time, particularly in Britain and
Еще одна трагедия была.
in France, which had never known levels of casualties of the kind that they'd experienced between 1914 and 1918.
The Treaty of Versailles was a deal signed in 1919 at the end of World War I, which mainly focused on weakening the German Empire. Despite the Austrian-Hungarian Empire being the main instigators, sending a harsh ultimatum to Siberia, the victorious powers primarily blamed Germany.
We were journeying to Paris not merely to liquidate the war, but to found a new order in Europe. We were preparing not peace only, but eternal peace. There was about us the halo of some divine mission. We must be alert, stern, righteous, and ascetic, for we were bent on doing great, permanent, and noble things.
They had to accept full responsibility for starting the war, and were made to pay enormous reparations. This crippled their economy, and fostered resentment towards the victorious powers, which eventually led to Hitler's rise to power and World War II. If the Allies had adopted a less punitive approach, like the US did to Japan after World War II, the devastating Second War and the rise of Nazi Germany might have been alternate history.
For 6 months, it was the closest we have ever had to a world government, and I don't suspect we'll ever have anything like it again. You can imagine all
Happy hand sleigh, takes the eggs for the happy echo.
Foxy Mobile social media is unlimited.
And only a tenner a month.
I was going to say that.
Не, а что, на исторических каналах тоже есть реклама.
the most powerful people in the world here, prime ministers, kings, presidents, foreign secretaries, plus all the people who came because they were here.
Napoleon invades Russia.
I must wipe away my melancholy and begin.
Скажи-ка, дядя, ведь недаром Москва, спаленная пожаром.
Because they were here.
Napoleon invades Russia.
I must wipe away my melancholy and begin the march to Moscow. I've convinced the heads of Europe of this resolution, and so I command the combined forces.
Окей. Случается хуйня.
Of France.
Скажи-ка, дядя, ведь недаром Москва, спаленная пожаром, французам отдана.
Of France, Austria, Italy, Germany, and Poland.
Они потом станут нашими союзниками.
I see nothing but success in my future.
А потом Франция, по иронии, присоединится к нам во Второй мировой.
In 1812, Napoleon famously declared war on Russia, citing their refusal to comply with the continental system. He brought around 500,000 soldiers from all across Europe to the border and proceeded to march them to Moscow. The Russian defense was confused with no planned resistance, with their eventual scorched earth tactic being largely improvised.
I'm writing to you because I've just won
Так, что сделать-то? Отдадим.
a great battle today.
Я забрал Москву.
Tomorrow we will resume our advance. Moscow is now only 200 miles away, and I think of you all the while.
Мы будем совершать убийство, но я буду думать о вас.
All yours.
At the Battle of Borodino, Napoleon
Бородино.
abandoned his usual cunning tactics and ordered a direct assault instead. The French won. Napoleon abandoned
Хитрая тактика. Зачем хитрить? Вот.
his usual cunning tactics and ordered a direct assault instead.
Go, 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 go.
The French won and Moscow was taken, but Little Boney never received the peace deal he expected. Eventually, winter took hold, and Napoleon embarked upon one of history's most disastrous retreats, costing him his
Так, ребята, мы не готовы к этой зиме. Нахуй.
army and
Наш главный друг в России — это зима.
ultimately his empire.
Fortune has
Знаете, говорят, что огонь — это друг и враг. Да, снег — это... Не, зима — это друг и враг.
abandoned me.
Все, нахуй отсюда.
I know that it is what fate has for me. Your words rattle in my head.
Кстати, а сколько у нас имеет оценку Наполеон на Кинопоиске? 6,2 на Кинопоиске, 6,3 на IMDb. Ну, не очень как-то. Чё по отзывам? Умное или как минимум не глупое кино может быть снято увлекательно и развлекательно. Фильм «Наполеон» режиссера Ридли Скотта представляет собой биографическую драму. Историческая драма, когда автор данного отзыва узнал о выходе данного кинополотна, да еще от самого Ридли Скотта, то добрался, тем более историю Наполеона. Ёб твою мать! Ну, короче, понятно. Чем дальше, тем тоже подтверждено. Что это? Не, конечно, на вкус и цвет, как говорится, но назови тогда фильм Полинаон или как-нибудь еще написать при этом жаль биографическая история, ребят, но это только для образованных аморов сгодится. Ну да, там, короче, Наполеона показали не очень правильно.
I'm nothing without you.
Before we continue, you have the option to your settings and switch on notifications. Christopher Columbus was bad at math.
Кто бы мог подумать? И вот это ошибка.
This Italian explorer was long portrayed as a hero and the discoverer
Но он не сдал математику!
of the Americas. Nowadays, a lot more attention has been paid to his brutal treatment of indigenous peoples. But his most celebrated feat, sailing across the Atlantic Ocean in search of Asia, actually came about due to his mistaken belief that the Earth is a lot smaller than it really is. He arrived at this conclusion by
Там черепахи держат ее.
using a mishmash of different estimates, as well as his own erroneous beliefs.
Мы доплывем до края земли.
If not for Spain's dire need for spices,
Испанцы!
he probably never would have gotten a single ship. Not for Spain's dire need for spices, he probably never would have gotten a single ship.
Ты, конечно, красава, Америку открыл, но у нас нет соли, перца, так что... Не.
Much less 3. What do you think was the most impactful mistake a human ever made? Let us know in the comments below.
Я не буду ничего говорить. Для меня это просто был урок истории. Повторение. Думаешь, мы, русские, не сдадимся? На, забирай! Да, мне понравилось, это хорошее видео. Ставьте лайки, подписывайтесь на канал, жмите на колокольчик, чтобы выпускать новые видео, пишите комментарии, летайте в телегу. С вами был Адольфа Стинтлера, всем спасибо за просмотр, всем пока.